What's up? This is Rebel Radio.
What up? What up? This is DJ Newmark.
This is Peanut Butter Wolf.
It's your boy. It's okay.
Keep checking out Rebel Radio.
Rebel Radio.
This is Rebel Radio.
We're in the place right here. Rebel Radio is going down.
Would you say Rebel Radio?
Oh, wait. Let's do it again.
Rebel Radio.
What's up, Rebels? Welcome back to Rebel Radio, the weekly show where I bring you the rebels who are shaping our culture. I'm your host, Josh Levine. This week, we're celebrating the 25th anniversary of Ohm Records with a dope conversation with my man, J Boogie. Check out J Boogie's remix of Body Language, Started Up, on the Ohm Records 25th anniversary compilation. For those of you that don't know J Boogie, he's a dope producer, DJ, remixer, club promoter, radio show host, very busy man, highly prolific, longtime part of the Bay Area underground music scene. He's also currently the music curator at the fitness tech company Hydro, and he was previously the head of hip hop and R&B programming at Pandora. And we get into some interesting stuff about the pros and cons of crossing genres as a creator and what that means in the context of trying to create a cohesive brand. I think he's got a really interesting perspective on that. And we also talk about, because of his background in the tech business, just what music and tech people can learn from each other. And I think there's a lot there. So excited to get into it with you right now. How did you get started, and who was mentoring you when you were first coming up?
Well, I moved to San Francisco in 1991 and started school at USF, and they had a radio station there. Mm-hmm. So at that time, there was a gentleman by the name of Billy Jam who was on the air, and he kind of took me under his wing as an engineer for his program. Mm-hmm. And this was 91. I was a hip hop fan, but I was also into like punk rock. I was just a skate kid, you know. Sure. And and I knew about hip hop, but definitely not as much as I should have at that time moving to San Francisco.
Not as much as Billy, I'm sure.
Not as much as Billy. So, but he was so cool, and he knew so much about the music. Yeah. And he didn't front like a white guy in the hip hop industry, and he was himself most importantly. And here I am, I'm 17 years old, and I'm meeting Cypress Hill, E40, Sugar T. You know, he would bring all these people into the studio, right, and I knew who they were just on record, but, you know, he brings in Funk Dubious, you know, and then he's bringing in all these other artists by the studio, and I'm meeting them or smoking blunts with them or hanging out and hearing their records, or they're giving me records just because I'm the engineer. Mm-hmm. And I soaked up his energy at KUSF. So that was really kind of where I got started. And unfortunately, he was removed from the air for playing obscenities.
Oh, wow.
Eventually. And, you know, his motto was Billy Jam, I don't give a damn. And he really didn't. Like, he didn't care about FCC rules. And he didn't care about stereotypes and what people thought. He just did his thing, which to me was very respectable.
Yeah.
However, he broke the rules, and I think that KUSF at the time said, you know, these are the rules you can't break.
Sure.
This is what keeps us on air. So
of course
they gave him the boot, but I came in and I said, look, KUSF cannot not have a hip hop radio show. Mm-hmm. If we sign the forms and promise to follow your policy regarding explicit content, would you consider having another show on the air? And I brought in my DJ crew that I was working with at the time, and they were amenable to it. So then we started Beat Sauce in about 92, 93. Yeah. And then we were on the air from 93 to like 2007 or 8.
Wow.
Every Sunday. So we were on there for a long time, carrying on that tradition of independent hip hop radio that Billy had started, and having guests come in and supporting local talent and supporting independent talent. And this was at a time when hip hop was not on the radio, you know.
Sure. Yeah.
Aside from like the Wake Up Show or whatever. You know?
Yeah. So that's so interesting. And I think one of the things about your career, so, you know, you had this show that ran for a really long time longer than most artists' careers, right? And you've had a relationship with Ohm for a really long time. Again, longer than most people even have careers.
Yeah.
What is it about you that allows for that type of longevity? What do you do to stay connected to it in that way?
Yeah. Well, I think it's two of the most important things any artist or person from then or now could do. And I kind of followed in Billy's footsteps, and I really just tried to be myself. You know, if you're true to yourself and what you do, it shows and comes out as authenticity. If I were to jump on the next bandwagon and try to create whatever the hot new trend is, you know, all of a sudden I'm going to be like, oh, well, I'm this Brazilian trap god, you know, and I'm going to make Brazilian trap beats. That shows that you're not authentic. And I think people see through that. And when you're chasing a short-term trend versus being a long-term artist, you lose yourself, and then you get swept up under the kind of the next trend that pops up.
Right.
However, because I'm so obsessed with new music, and music is such a part of my life, I get into Brazilian trap beats and chill Brazilian trap stuff. And I'm aware of artists like, you know, what Sango's doing, or I don't know how to pronounce it, because it's got to be in Brazilian, but I call it dick vapors, but I don't think it's dick vapors, but it's like DCKVRPZ.
Okay.
And, you know, Vur is another artist that I'm super into right now, VHOOR. But there are all these like Brazilian teenage kids making trap beats, chill trap, you know, chill Brazilian trap, baile chill, baile funk, if you will. And it's on its second round. So I remember when Mad Decent and Diplo was on the first baile funk wave.
That's right.
Baile funk first hit, and they were doing all the remixes. And now here it is, you know, 2021, and there's a new wave of baile funk mixed with R&B, more chilled out vibes and trap. And, you know, people like Joe K from Selection are supporting that kind of music, and I'm up on it and I get into it. Doesn't mean that I'm going to go try to sound like that. But if I'm aware of it, if I'm aware of the trend, and I incorporate the vibe or energy into what I do somewhat, and borrow from ideas and concepts, then you can stay current and relevant to what's happening today, instead of holding on to who you were in 95. If I just made music or beats or tried to DJ like I did in 95, 97, you wouldn't be relevant, and people would just be like, oh, he's that old classic DJ dude, and and you lose your relevancy. So staying true to yourself, but also staying aware of what's popping, you know, and what's hot. Yeah.
That's great. Okay, let me take a step back before that. And I know you talked about getting to San Francisco in 91. But go back to the very beginning. Do you remember the first record you ever bought for yourself?
Well, like vinyl record?
Any piece of music
that I bought myself with my own money.
Yeah.
I think it might have been Herbie Hancock's Rocket, or like, I don't know. I don't remember exactly what year that was, but I think the Breakin' soundtrack, or like one of the breakdance movies that was hot, like came out with a Paul Hardcastle song called 19 that I was really into.
I think that was Breakin'.
It was, so it was like, it was either Breakin' or Rocket. It was that era where electro and breakdance music was crossing into the mainstream. So you had Herbie Hancock's Rocket, and you had the Breakin' soundtrack, and you know, Nucleus and Jam on It, and all that kind of electro music was super hot. Planet Rock, all those classics. So I think that was one of my first ones. But 3 Feet High and Rising might have been my like first adult, like post-puberty purchase. I don't know. I don't know. Yeah.
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 That's a good one.
I'm one of those.
That's a great, that's a great place to start a musical journey for sure.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. You talk about, the idea of kind of not getting lost in the past, which I think it's difficult for DJs. We both have lots of friends who are, incredible DJs, but, their selection and I think their interest stops at a certain year. Right. And I think, for the average consumer, average listener, their interest stops. There's studies that show like around 26, your musical taste gets frozen. Right. And, it's that 14 to 26 when you're really like discovering and in it with music. And then people move on with other things in their lives and they stick with that. And so, it doesn't sound like that's a tactic for you. It sounds like that's just a natural thing that that you stay interested in new music.
Totally, man. I mean, I agree with you. I remember when I was working at Pandora, I was doing this study because there was a lot of scientists there and a lot of people doing really heavy research on music listening habits and how music listening, affects you psychologically and how you respond. And it was like people get stuck in their high school years. Whatever your favorite artist was in high school or at a certain age, you really connected that with your magic moments. And then that was your defining music kind of era. Sure. And that's why 90s hip hop was so big at a certain time because people who grew up in that period and then it was the 2000s, and 2000s hip hop had its comeback because everybody just got older, and that was when they were in high school. And now it's like, it's slowly becoming like that stuff that was popular in the 2010s is coming back and becoming popular with the next generation that are old enough to be in the clubs or whatever. And they're connected to that certain era of music. But I think that's for the average listener. And it's important to note that there's a lot of different ways and types of people that listen to music. There's people that just want to hear their favorite songs and nothing else. There's people that only want to discover brand new music and really don't care about the past. And then there's people that are really interested in consuming music all the time, but they have a musical history and a repertoire and a connection to stuff. And I think those people naturally become DJs or producers or find themselves in the industry because they look at music historically, but also pay attention to what's happening currently.
So, I want to dig into that a little bit because obviously you have a lot of, you're deep in that world of understanding, different types of listeners. And, but I'm curious, when your crate, so to speak, is as big as yours, right? That you cross multiple genres, multiple generations of music, and you're still continuing to discover new music. Like, that makes the process of selecting, I think, really difficult.
Yeah, it does.
Right? Because if you're a classic rock DJ and you play, rock bands between 1968 and 1978, whatever, right? Yeah. That job's not that hard.
Yeah.
But, you're talking about a really long time period, and especially now when there's new music, left and right, on a daily basis, right? So how do you do that? How do you sort through all that?
It's the most challenging part of kind of doing what I do. And I think that you have to continually check yourself to not be all over the road, unless that's what it calls for, because, my musical interests are a little ADD. Like I'll tell you about chill baile funk, but also totally be into this modern funk boogie throwback that XL Middleton dropped. But I'm really into R&B, and I love that new Jen Aiko release. And then I'm into house music. Have you heard the new Mark Farina? So, and that's kind of what I have a playlist called J Boogie Vibes that I have on Spotify, and that's kind of what it is. It's like, that's my, like, here's my brain, bro. Look at it. This is my brain, curated a little bit, but like,
right.
It's all over the place. And I think that more people are starting to listen to music that way, especially the younger generation are super into the baby and like current hip hop hits, but they'll also go see Toro y Moi play at a show, or they're also into, you know, rock music or punk or heavy metal or whatever. And I think that notion of being, oh, I'm just a hip hop person or I'm just a rock person is slowly fading away a little bit more, hopefully.
Yeah.
But
no, I think you're right. And I think it's, you know, some of that is generational, right? Like, you know, we grew up, you know, I think like that era, you look at all the, you know, all the teen movies from our high school, you know, college
You're about
days.
to say Kid and Play, huh? You're about to say Kid and Play.
Well, I was going to say, like, you know, that there's always that theme of those movies that's like the nerds versus the cool kids, the jocks. Like, it was all about the separate cliques that happened. And I think, you know, music played a big part of that, right? So if you're like us and you grew up in hip hop, you had this secret that no one else had, right? Because people didn't know about it. They were scared of it. Their parents wouldn't let them listen to it, whatever. There were these barriers. You couldn't hear it on the radio. So you had to go to the stores and find it, or you had to, you had to come to my neighborhood in Fillmore and like survive that, right? Or whatever. So, and then, you know, the punk rock kids had their own thing. And then at a certain point, they're like, hey, we're both kind of rebels. Like, we can click up together a little bit. But they were against the heavy metal kids. And, you know, there's all this separation. And I think we live in a society now that is, you know, way more inclusive, way more sort of understanding of each other's differences, right? And so I think the musical taste is kind of like it flows from that. At the same time, right?
Absolutely, man.
So at the same time is, you know, you've worked in radio. You talked about, you know, your time at Pandora. And so you get the, you know, I think there's also a value to genre, right? There's a value to saying, you know, we don't play this, we play that on this station or at this club or in, you know, whatever, right? There's value to the DJ or the programmer who's like can narrow his selection, or to the listener who just wants to be entertained and not challenged with some, you know, some crazy left field thing that, like, unless that's what you're looking for, right? But chances are, if you're throwing on a Pandora station while you're driving or, you know, or working out, that's maybe not what you're looking for.
Absolutely. And I couldn't agree more, because, you know, that was, as an artist and a DJ, that was my greatest asset, being a Swiss Army knife that could do anything. Like, hey, I can rock a Bhangra party for an Indian wedding, and I can rock a hip hop club, and I can go DJ a reggae party down the street all in the same night. But, you know, if it's also your biggest weakness, because then if you do that all the time, nobody knows exactly what they're going to get, and you don't have a defined brand, or, like you said, genre. So if you book Mark Farina, again, using that example, to play, you know, you're going to get some deep house. You know, if you book Bass Vector to DJ your party, you know, you're going to get some pretty aggressive, like dubstep, heavy, whatever. You know, those artists, they have a brand. If you're going to book, you know, Shortcut for a party, I mean, he does all genres too, so maybe that's not the best example, but, you know, you have a certain brand and sound you're expected to get. So if you're continually pushing the envelope and being all over the place, people aren't sure what they're going to get. Are we going to get hip hop J Boogie, or are we going to get house J Boogie? Are we going to get reggae J Boogie, or left field J Boogie? And that puts kind of a limit on how far you can go in certain situations, getting booked for shows, getting put on tours or whatnot. So
is that a real thing that you ran into? Like,
oh yeah,
did
absolutely.
you find yourself hampered by that?
It's something. Yeah, it's something like, you know, I would talk to a manager, a potential manager, or or booking agent, and it would be, well, do you want to be a band, or do you want to be a DJ? Do you want to be a producer? Are you doing down tempo and chill out music, or are you doing Latin music, or are you doing reggae? Because here's your album and it's got everything on it.
Yeah.
You know, when you're trying to sell something like a music personality or a brand or an energy, I think especially that time in the 90s, 2000s, that era, it was easier to sell something that's packaged in a little box and says, this is what you're going to get 100% of the time. And this is what it's going to work. And this is how people respond to it. And we have social numbers that we can put up against it, and listeners and Polestar and blah, blah, blah. And you can sell it easily. It's the business of music. So you have to be aware of that, because you can't just make music in a vacuum. I mean, you can, but it's going to be harder to survive a long time if you don't think about it from a business standpoint. You know?
Sure. So how has that affected you? How do you adapt, or have you, or do you just say, fuck it, I'm going to do my thing and it'll work out?
I think I did both. I adapted at times, and I adapted when I knew it would help push my career a little more. But staying true to myself, being a diverse, person, and even finding ways to do both, where like, okay, I'll adapt and I'll have this sound, a J Boogie sound, but it can incorporate some Latin elements and some African elements and some reggae elements and some house and hip hop without going so deep down one of those holes that you lose everybody. Right. So it's like, a little touch of this Fela remix with a hip hop breakbeat over the top and a little common sample. Everybody can get into that, and it crosses. It's like 3 genres in one song, but it's not straight Afrobeat or straight hip hop or whatever. So as a DJ and producer, you found little ways to kind of ride the wave and go here and go there, whatever, but not taking a big left turn and just being like, okay, I'm just going to play all straight cumbia music right now. And if you don't like it, tough.
Sure.
Versus a cumbia remix of a Biggie song that everybody knows. And people who are into cumbia are going to be like, oh, this is kind of fresh. And people who are into Biggie are like, this is different. This is unique. I'm not used to hearing it this way, but it satisfies both audiences. Yeah.
So one of the things I've always appreciated about you is, you have an impressive body of work, making music, clubs, parties, radio shows, and you also have kept a day job at the same time. And which you're going to have to teach us some time management skills that allow you to do all that. But so, as we talked about, you worked at Pandora. I think now you're working with Hydro, right? The rowing,
that's correct.
The home rower, which is a amazing, beautiful machine that I see ads in my social feed for. So I want to talk a little bit about what you're doing with them, curating music, but I'm curious, first of all, just, how does that change, having an income source outside of music, how does that change your creative process, or does it?
It does. It did, definitely. And it does. I think it does for the better, because when you're a DJ or a producer and you're relying on your music and art and performance for your sole income level, and you live in a metropolitan area like San Francisco or the Bay Area or Los Angeles or New York or even Austin now, it's expensive. The cost of living is expensive. New York and San Francisco being top contenders, and LA and Austin continually changing, and every, I think, metropolitan area really changing.
Yeah.
So if music is your only income, and with the way streaming has changed the income level for artists for the less, which is obvious, so you're no longer getting the income you would on physical sales. You can't survive in these cities, and you have to say, okay, well, I'm either touring or merch. And not everybody can do that full time or has the time, like you said, to tour constantly and constantly invest in creating merch, because you have to invest in it, sell it,
Right.
distribution, package, shipping, all the things that come along with merchandising.
Yep.
Not everybody has access to, like, they can make a beat and throw it up on SoundCloud or Spotify or whatever. So, so with that being said, you have to find income at a different place, unless you rely on your music. If you rely on your music, you have to think more business wise, and you have to think about what is going to make me money when I'm creating. That's your sole purpose, is like, I need to make money. What's going to make money? I'm going to make music and art for money. And everybody has opinions about that and how it works. But making music for money, for me, just didn't feel right. And then you overthink things and second guess yourself, and you try to do all these different things and become somebody you're not, just to make money. Whereas if you have an outside income, you can make art and music for art's sake and for expressing yourself, and put it out there and distribute it and do your best to market it and promote it. But like, this is me, this is what I do. I'm going to put it out here. If it makes money, cool. If it doesn't, I have additional income, and I don't have to second guess my art and what I'm doing in order to create something that's going to make money. Does that mean you don't ever try to make money? No, but
Sure.
That's not the primary driver for your art. And then you have the freedom to just kind of meditate on what you're going to create. I'm sure that when Madlib sits down to make a beat, like, he doesn't think of, wow, I'm going to make this beat and sell it to this for who and make money on this, and it's going to get in this wherever.
Right.
That's what Madlib does. He makes beats and he makes art and he collaborates with people, and he does what's inside himself. And he has a team to help him generate income in other ways. But I think that's critical from an artist perspective, to be yourself,
I think it is. And I, we like to think of that as a kind of modern thing. I was just reading an article the other day about Mo Austin, who used to run Warner Brothers in the 70s and in the 60s, 70s. And they talked about, he had this mantra. So he signed Jimi Hendrix, he signed Fleetwood Mac, he made massive hits for that company, with those guys. And his mantra was like, let's make great music, don't worry about hits. And he had to really, fight that with his board and his bosses and his, sometimes his artists, and really, ingrain that into his staff. Right. And, this idea that, like, we have to make stuff that we're proud of, that we love, and not, but I think that takes work to not think about the outcome, for Madlib to sit down and separate himself, or for you to, separate yourself from, what playlist is this going to get on, or what, right? Like I think that's only natural.
Yeah, it is.
So, and then, on that note, right. So at the same time, you're not working at UPS, you're working at cool places that are involved in music.
Yeah.
And so what has that taught you? You worked at Pandora, which is a tech company. Hydro, I imagine, sees themselves as a tech company. What have you learned about the relationship between tech and music? And specifically, I think the people, there's a lot of talk about San Francisco and how it's, it's been overrun by tech people and that's changed the culture of the city, whatever. Like, what have you learned about tech people versus music people?
I think listening to, it's going to sound super corny, but just listening to each other a little bit so that they can learn each other's perspectives is super critical, but there is also, it was great. The working environment at Pandora was fantastic because we had a team of specialists, genre specialists, and there was a huge team of scientists and engineers working on projects. And they were really curious about our perspective and our knowledge and our historical knowledge, and really tapped into it and tried to gain perspective. And it was a good example of I could sit down and even just talking about operational nuts and bolts of things like, okay, well, Puff Daddy is also known as P. Diddy, but he also has a group known as Puff Daddy and the Family. Right. But he also has this side project that's Puff Daddy and somebody. But they all kind of are the same artist, even though they're not on this project. So it sounds like a mess, but even little messy metadata problems that a scientist or an engineer might not think of, but and you as a DJ might not even think of, who that is. If I said all those artist titles, who that is. Sure. But when you need to have an artist profile page in a product, and it needs to be connected to statistics for that artist, and it needs to be connected to songs and other musical information for that artist, you need to be able to say P. Diddy is Puff Daddy and the Family. Right. And you need to be able to connect those things, even though it's not, but they are. So that takes kind of a musical mind and an engineering mind to be able to meet and figure those things out.
That's interesting.
And when you see an artist combination, when two artists work, and it's, somebody and, it's Madlib and Mos Def. Well, does that live on the Madlib page or the Mos Def page? Or do you make a Madlib and Mos Def page? Or does it live on both? Or do you have all three? And it's finding out those, how to solve those problems, and working with engineers, them giving you options, and then telling them oh yeah, that works for the Madlib listeners, but not the Mos Def listeners. Or how are we going to get that Mos Def music to play with the Black Star station and cross with Talib's station? Or how do these three interconnect but not connect? Because we all know that Mos Def, Black Star, and Talib Kweli are three independent artists, but they're also connected. So, you have to think of things with an engineering mind and look at their perspectives, but also be able to share your musical perspectives. Where I think things become a problem, and you probably hear more about because it's more dramatic, is just that, some tech people, and just like some music people, come with a privileged sense of self and a closed mind about who they are, what they like. And those people in music, tech, or any other field kind of aren't, they're not pleasant to work with if they're closed-minded and they have a privileged sense of self, and they're the kind of this type A personality that can't collaborate or cooperate, then it's harder in the end to work with them. So I think there's stereotypes about people in each industry that way, and you and I both know that not everybody is like that.
Of course, yeah.
Also you can, you could throw a rock and hit an asshole. So,
I love that. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's so interesting what you're talking about. And I always think of our genre, our connection to genre is so, so tied to the experience of record stores, right?
Yeah.
Because at a certain point, right, the guy had to know where to stock the record in the store. And they weren't going to put 5 copies of the record in 5 different sections, right? So Michael Jackson was either a pop artist or an R&B artist, and know, et cetera, et cetera. And I think it's, connected to the decline of record stores that now we have this fluidity of genres, right? Because you literally couldn't have that if you only had so much shelf space and you needed one spot for each record, right? And, you know, Pandora can say, it's this and this, right? In unique, and that's just created all kind of possibility, which creates confusion, and, you know, that's the way it goes.
Yeah. But I think with the popularity of playlisting and, like, you know, the true mixtape from back in the day would have an eclectic selection of stuff. And I think that energy is carried over to playlisting too, where a lot of the popular brand forward playlists are going to have a diverse genre, you know, in them, and they'll have multiple styles of music in them. So yeah, absolutely. You know, we were talking about how much music you have to select from. What do you do to clean your ears out? Or is that something you think about? Yeah, I do it almost naturally. I don't even think of it that way, but I do it naturally. I listen to the radio a lot. So not what I think people would typically think of the radio, but I listen to very specific stations like KCRW. I listen to like 3 or 4 jazz radio stations, KMHD in Portland. There's a San Francisco station. There's a couple other international stations, some radio stations in France. I listen to kind of global radio to, first of all, just have somebody else to pick music for me that I can discover. So you don't want to always be actively listening and DJing. You want to just like, hey, just play me music.
Right.
And I grew up in an era where I'm intimately connected to this radio model where I need to feel like there's somebody on the other side, a human being on the other side transmitting music to me, and I'm listening to that music collectively with a group of other people. And I think that's just a mindset of my age and era that I grew up. I don't know if other people have those connections, but it's a much more intimate concept to me than a robot playing music directly to me. And this is, I'm the only one listening to it. Because when you're listening with a group of other people together, it has a communal effect, and you have this kind of communal concept subconsciously in your mind that, oh, there's this person somewhere in Portland or Los Angeles or Berlin or Paris, France, broadcasting to a huge group of people worldwide, and myself and a lot of other people like me are enjoying it together. So I'm stuck on that, and that's what I do to clean my ears. I listen to jazz and a lot of radio.
Yeah. No, that's so cool. And I do think that's something special that, you know, we had, you know, I don't know that younger generations have as much of, is that, you know, that communal sense. Right. And I, you know, I've talked about, for me, when I first time, you know, I went to the Fresh Fest in Oakland Coliseum when I was 14.
Oh my God. Wow.
And that was the first time, you know, like I knew breaking and hip hop was big, but I saw 30,000 kids all in fat laces and, you know, and you're like, wow, Kangos and shit.
Not just me.
Yeah. And that's the thing. Like that was a moment for me where I was like, oh, it's not just me and my friends that, you know, have this thing, but there's a real thing out there. And then, you know, versions of that when you travel to other countries and you know, whatever. Right. And I think there is something to be said for that, like, communal experience, the way you said it.
Yeah.
And I think we have that. I mean, I think that speaks to the rise of music festivals, right? That people want to be in it with a bunch of other people having this same experience at the same time.
Yeah. And Twitch is the modern day equivalent of that. Like you're in the chat and you see all these other people, you know, listening to the same DJ or artist as you on Twitch.
Yeah.
And I honestly think those kids of the people that age have not experienced that feeling before, and they're so hyped on it. Like they're in the chat, they're like going and they're talking, and the words community come up so much when people are talking about artists and Twitch.
Interesting.
That it's like, it's kind of like the modern day radio, but kids never listened to the radio because they didn't want to hear ads in top 40. And they, you know, it's what their parents did in their cars. And that certainly wasn't cool. I'd rather just listen on YouTube or Spotify.
Yeah.
So that community feeling that Twitch is giving the younger generation might be that kind of radio sense of communal radio, or listening to a record in a record store with 5 or 6 digger buddies and everybody being like, oh, Dad, you know, like, let's go get that, you know.
Yeah.
It's that communal listening energy. You know?
So where do you go for that now as a fan and as a creator, right? Like, you know, I think about San Francisco, right? So, you know, as you know, I grew up there. I grew up going to Townsend, Das Club, DVA, DNA Lounge, you know.
Oh my gosh,
you know, that was my era, and then into like Cream of Beat and, you know, right. But Mr. Fives, obviously.
Yeah.
My point was, right, that was a community. You'd see some of the same people every night, the same DJs, the same records, you know. There's this feeling that even if you didn't know everybody in the room, you were in it together, and you had this shared, you know, values and all that, right? And the city's changed in, you know, none of that I think still exists, or not as a,
definitely not this year.
Yeah, for sure.
Definitely not this year.
For sure. Right. But also like the world changed. Right. And there's just, you know, we no longer have this exclusive club that like we once belonged to. So I guess my question is, you know, as a DJ, as a producer, and as a fan, where do you find that sense of community now?
Oh man. Well, for me, I don't think being in a group experience with people can ever be replaced. I think people are trying to find it online, but and you know, in Twitch and other ways, there's other ways of kind of experiencing that. And everybody's doing Zoom dance rooms and stuff, but it's interesting and it's cute, but I don't think it can't replace. Like, if we were not in the middle of the pandemic, it'll be interesting to see what sticks around and continues to be popular or a place. You know, you might go check out stuff online, but I think that feeling music, feeling frequencies, like feeling low end frequencies, there's a vibration, there's a change in matter and waveform that happen with low end frequencies, and you're experiencing that with a group of people, you know, and that energy I don't think can be replaced digitally for the time being. Who knows, you know, VR and all this other stuff that's popping up is, you know, someone can probably prove me wrong right now, but I think that, you know, if sans pandemic, if it wasn't a pandemic right now, going to shows and live music venues at clubs and all over the place and all over the world is something that's where I connect with that community of music. I always made an annual trek to Austin for South by Southwest. I've done that for 15 years straight, you know, except for this year. And that communal energy that happens there is huge. I go to Jazz Fest in New Orleans this year. The first, you know, as soon as I'm vaccinated and I can make a flight, I'll be in New Orleans. That's just it. And experiencing music with other people and hopefully supporting all the musicians that really suffered. I mean, everybody has suffered, but I think that musicians specifically and people in the food industry have suffered a lot, you know. So helping out those folks.
Yeah. No, that's great. So I know you got this remix out with Ohm for the 25th anniversary of Ohm Records. Which those guys just, you know, surviving that long is a major accomplishment. Right. And staying relevant for that long, especially. Is really cool. So talk about that relationship, right? You know, it's those relationships are not easy sometimes. But you guys have had a long, you know, relationship together. So if you're talking to young artists coming up, what should they do to make that label? Or maybe, if you're giving advice to a label, either side, what should they do to make those relationships work?
Oh, man. Well, I think, you've got to find, almost like what we were talking about earlier, finding that balance of business and artistry. Like, you were talking about, like, don't be worried about making hits. Don't be so focused on the money, but also you can't just let an artist be free range. It's almost like raising kids. You want to create some safe boundaries, some boundaries to safety, and some boundaries of like, no, you can't just eat that. You can't just eat a piece of plastic. You got to, have boundaries, but you also give them the freedom to experience life and being an artist and develop on their own so that they can really truly express themselves. And I think that's how people learn. Like, I was learning about an ancient Hawaiian culture that was based on, this is pre-colonialism and stuff. And they had, the Hawaiians had certain times where there were certain times that were defined for work and defined for play and defined for war. It was like, this is when we're going to fight and battle, and this is when we're going to work, and this is when we're going to play and have fun. And you need to have that defined energy of playfulness, and the human mind needs to be able to experiment and try new things, to discover new things. Otherwise, if it's all work, you're stuck in that chasing the dollar. And if it's all play, you don't have any boundaries that'll get you to the next stage. So it's just finding that delicate life balance, And I think with music and business, there's always a push and a pull and a wave, and it's to keep going a long time. Just the awareness of that will kind of help you get to the next phase. Just like, oh, this is where we need to really just kind of crank and get the spreadsheet looking right and make sure we're spending money wisely. And this is where we're going to go in and just spend a month in the studio trying out new stuff and experimenting. And then we know that when that's done, we'll get back to the business, or when that's done, we'll get back to the creative side.
Sure.
And being aware of both and not stuck in your own kind of rut,
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
That's good advice for sure. Okay. I got a quick lightning round for you before I let you get back to Hawaii. What's your favorite city to travel to?
Well, I was just talking about New Orleans. That's I think New Orleans for me. I mean, I love New York with my heart, and I love Austin because I have so many good friends in Austin, and I've had so many good musical experiences there. But New Orleans, there's nothing like it.
Absolutely.
And there's so much history. It's history, good and bad, there. So, especially if you get into music history at all, it's a birthplace of so much.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, it's great. We went to Jazz Fest, I think 3 years ago for the first time. Incredible.
Life-changing. And it's just like a whole different world too. You end up in the traditional jazz tent or the gospel tent. We would start and end our day with the gospel tent. I'm not a huge gospel listener, but I really enjoy it, and feeling the way gospel was supposed to be in a group setting live.
That's the place to see gospel. We spent about an hour in there.
Yeah, man.
Days. Yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Who's your favorite DJ?
Oh, now past all time. Oh man. I think probably Shortcut.
Wow.
With Apollo being a close runner-up. I grew up watching those guys and learning from those guys, and how they would juggle dance hall and hip hop and R&B and classics and breaks and house and everything together seamlessly, so quickly, with skills and video mix. It was good. And I think Shortcut's work ethic, really just seeing how much he's done up to this day, from
Sure.
the beginning up to this day, he's still cranking and he's still collecting and digging 45s and streaming on Twitch and traveling when it's safe. And I think Shortcut is just, he's like a Swiss Army knife almost. He just does everything so well.
Yeah, I love that answer, and both of those guys, obviously, and I appreciate. I mean, I appreciate anybody that gets up there and does, gives it their best. I do think, turntablism to some extent, it's become about the tricks more than the music, and that's not to take anything like what some of these young cats are doing. It's unreal, right? And I'm not shitting on them at all, but. With those guys, it's the music first, right? And the tricks become part of the show, but it's still about the music first.
Yeah.
And I love
and
that.
They could do both expertly. Short could sit there and scratch for hours and run a clinic.
Yeah.
And he does that on Twitch sometimes.
Yeah.
But I think, it is both. And the selection side, both being so tight.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it was Apollo. I interviewed the three of them one time many years ago, and one of them said, you're supposed to be able to watch a DJ with your eyes closed. And
I think that's Apollo, man.
Yeah,
it sounds like that.
So.
I'll tell you a quick Apollo story, and one of the reasons why. I used to watch at school, which was a hip hop party at the Kennel Club, which is now the Justice League. Apollo would show up with a stack of records like this. Right? Like this. Put them in front of him without sleeves, just a stack of vinyl. And he would throw them on the turntable, drop, sometimes doubles, do his tricks, do his set, and like almost literally throw them behind him. And he was just like grabbing, grab. And this was obviously pre-Serato.
Yeah.
But I used to watch that and be like, what a beast. Like, what a beast. He's doing that. And he wasn't chewing up things, and he wasn't paying attention. He wasn't looking at he was looking and working, but it was almost like it was subliminal to him. Wow. And he wasn't, finding all those places, and it was seamless. And I was, that sounds like Apollo had almost like a militaristic DJ training almost type. And that's like, you'd always see him fitted in camo too. So he played the part.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
What's the last great book you read or listened to?
Oh, I'm ashamed to tell you the book I'm listening to now, but I'll say it now. The book that I'm listening to right now is called Positive Discipline for Parents, and I have 2 5-year-olds.
Wow.
And it's my first parenting trip. And I'm really just trying to find a positive way of being like a cool dad, but also keep things in line. And I think also just, I don't want to be a no parent, but just finding ways to do it right. So
hey man,
learning about parenting.
There is no shame in that. I think, there's anybody who still buys into the myth that we know how to parent just automatically, like they're missing it. My son's 11. I read a lot of parenting books, got some really good wisdom and, things to try and all of that. And I think that's definitely worth it.
And the last book I read is actually kind of on the Hawaii topic. It's called The Legend of Ono, and it's a Hunter S. Thompson book.
Cool.
Kind of, I don't want to give too much about it away, but it's deeply ingrained in like classic Hawaiian culture myths, and also just kind of what we were talking about earlier, just about colonialism and capitalism mixing with Hawaiian cultures and everything. It's kind of an interesting read.
Dope.
I think it's kind of a rare book by Hunter S. Thompson, but I got a copy and had it, and it's well worth the read.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
Nice. What movie do you think you've seen the most in your life?
I feel Coming to America, maybe just because they dropped part 2, but that's definitely a movie that I've just seen so much. Star Wars, once it became available, like
Mhm.
definitely a lot of Star Wars, I think. But coming to America throughout my lifetime, I think has just been on repeat.
Yeah, that's a good one. Who's someone you haven't met but you've learned a lot from?
Ooh. It's weird. My brain is going in so many circles, but I think I'm going to pick the music world for it. And I'm just going to say recently now. Well, shit, I have met him. So I was going to say Decap as a producer is doing a really good job of sharing his knowledge through social media and video. But I've met Decap, so I'll say the runner-up right now would be Kenny Beats.
Okay.
He's been running these Twitch and video like series in his studio, and as a producer, I'm always I want to keep up with what's new, what's hot, what people are working on. So I've learned a lot of things like how, Ableton tricks to his big thing, and it's one thing that I take to heart, and probably the most important thing I learned from him is don't overthink it. Like just stop overthinking things, because if you just let your brain kind of take you away and start thinking about things too much, you lose that natural ability to get in touch with yourself and what you're doing.
Yeah, that's cool.
So don't overthink shit. Yeah.
Nice.
Kenny Beats. God bless the Kenny Beats Twitch feed.
Nice.
Yeah.
So if I worked for you or we worked together, what's something I would hear you say over and over?
That's a good one. Hella? I don't know. Somebody called me out of saying that too much, but
is that right?
Yeah. I don't know if we were working on a project.
I mean, I think you're supposed to say that. I just, the only thing is like down here, you meet somebody else from the Bay and then they want to throw hella in the next sentence.
Yeah.
Just to show you that,
oh man, that's a good question. I have no idea. You stumped me on that one.
That's okay.
I think let's try that would probably be things, because I'm into just trying things a lot. So if we're working on something, like, let's try that and see what happens.
Yeah.
That's what I say that a lot. Let's try that and see what happens.
Nice.
If it works, it works. It doesn't, we try something next. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. It gives you the freedom to experiment and
flexibility. I'm not committed to one specific thing. So
nice. So what are you working on next? What are you most excited about? What's going on with Hydro? What's next for J Boogie?
So Hydro, I've been doing these weekly DJ mixes. They do live DJ rows on Saturday. And if you're not familiar with Hydro, it's basically like if Peloton was a rowing machine. It's kind of what I usually tell people. It's a really high-end indoor rower with a big, beautiful video touch screen. And somewhere in Miami or Boston or somewhere else, there's a crew of Olympic trained athletes filming a video on the water, and you're rowing with them. And what I'm doing is curating the soundtrack that they'll be rowing to.
Are you rowing at home?
No. No. I know I'm programming the playlist.
No, I mean like separate to that. Have you started rowing?
No.
Not really. Okay.
I'm swimming and surfing as much as I can. So but I'd like to be. They're very expensive. Yeah. So and you got to have room in your place, and probably not 2 5-year-olds at this time. I think you would take that out.
For sure.
But so I'm putting together DJ mixes for them and other genre focused music playlists and mixes for that, and it's geared towards a wider audience. So it's more like programming radio for the general public. Sure. It's not like the hottest, latest, new, whatever I'm into that's come out.
Of course.
You put yourself on the shelf and you're programming for people's workouts. So you need to make that. It's a lot of dance music, a lot of hip hop, a lot of pop. And then with myself, I'm doing Dubtronic Radio once a month, which is an online radio show that I'm posting on my Mixcloud and SoundCloud. And then I'm doing a radio program on KPFA in Berkeley. which is centered around on new global remix music. So music from Africa, Afrobeats on the piano, cumbia, Latin and Brazilian remixes, basically any kind of remixy, globally influenced music. It's a mix that I work with Juan G on, and he's kind of like the Bay Area. I call him the king of Afrobeat. I don't know if he would like that title, but he's the Afrobeat piano guy in the Bay Area, and he does a great job. So being a partner with him, I learned tons. And he actually relocated to Ghana temporarily. So we're putting together the show in Hawaii and Ghana and shipping it into the Berkeley station to be broadcast in the entire Bay Area, Fresno, and Santa Cruz. Which is kind of interesting. So
absolutely.
That is the other radio show. And then I'm working on new music for myself and remixes for other people. And I'd like to eventually kind of have another release with Ohm and do new projects and new collaborations with artists. Even here in Hawaii, I'm learning a lot about traditional Hawaiian music. So how can I flip that into something J-Boogie like without it sounding corny? You know,
I mean, you're the guy to figure that out.
Yeah, right.
That's cool. Yeah. Dope, man. That's exciting. Well, dude, I appreciate you talking with me. It's so many good stories.
Thanks, Josh. Yeah, no, I appreciate you having me on and taking the time to hang out.
Yeah, anytime. We'll have to do it in person one of these days.
I'm game. Well, next time you come home and I come home and things are safe, everybody gets a shot. We'll hang out in San Francisco and we'll see the new city.
That's what's up.
Yeah.
Cool. How should everybody find you online?
jboogie.com is my website. Cool. And you can find all my socials there. Most of my socials are JBoogie Justin or JBoogie Dubtronic. And my radio shows all get posted to Mixcloud and SoundCloud. So Mixcloud/JBoogie, SoundCloud/JBoogie. And just holler, DM me and say what's up, and I'll send you the newest latest.
Right on, man. Appreciate you.
Cool. Yeah, man. Thank you.
That was J-Boogie on Rebel Radio. I hope you enjoyed it. I know I did. Make sure you go check out the Ohm Records 25th anniversary compilation. Support that label that's been doing great things for now 2.5 decades and not stopping. Let us know what you thought about this one. Hit us up on Twitter, Facebook, wherever you like. We're at Rebel Radio Net. We have videos of a lot of our episodes on our YouTube channel. And most importantly, come back next week for more Rebel Radio. Peace.